When you were talking about the two sort of order of magnitude shifts, well, I'm just going to very oversimplify sort of these two kind of big
Yeah.
leadership moments. What did you have to stop doing as a leader when you were making the shift, or something that you had to leave behind from either of those leadership shifts?
Yeah. So probably one of the first ones. So by the way, my background before moving over to more of a people manager, CTO role, is what was as an IC technologist, engineer. I was a developer for a long time, but then went more to like an architect and eventually became a principal engineer. Part of my, I think, identity was as the person who had the technical answers. Like people came to me to say, hey, how does this thing work? What can we do here? What are the options, etc. And I think for a long time, even as I started moving more into a people management role, I was still able to be hands-on enough with the technology that I could still, have pretty good understanding of it and be able to be that same sort of person. One of the challenges that I have, especially in this role, is that I'm not that person at all anymore. And I feel like I still want to be somewhere deep there in my mind that maybe I should be, but I'm just not, because it's not what I don't have time for it. Right? I got to focus on these other things. And so I think it's a part of letting go of what is really, again, is still maybe a core part of my identity as, an employee or as a person, that as a technologist, with all the answers. I still consider myself a technologist, but now it's like, the CTO whiteboard, 5,000 foot level, and very much shifting to relying on others for those sorts of technical insights and so forth. And so I think that's a really challenging one. And I also have to be very careful about trying to, because my brain naturally goes to these things. So for instance, what I was going to say, try not to be the technologist, because I think my brain will naturally go try to do that when we're having a technical discussion. And the reality is I don't have as much context as I used to. And so me jumping in and trying to solve it is not going to be usually helpful. And so I kind of have to hold back a little bit. And so that's one of the biggest challenges, is kind of holding back in those areas. And I see, I think this is a transition everyone goes through, because to your point, what got you here, or got whatever, I don't know how they phrased it, but the things that made you strong in the past are useful, but probably aren't what define you or your success today. And I think oftentimes you do see people leaning on those things perhaps more than they should. So that's something I'm trying to be cognizant of, and trying my best to let go of, or at least not let color my perception or execution.
Absolutely. I want to bring up the sort of dilemma that you and I've talked about a little bit, of sort of the navigating and negotiating these trade-offs of, having the context, being really close to the details versus needing to be sort of at this high level. But the question I wanted to ask beforehand, just to kind of get the other side of this, is, I guess, what's the most important place that you spend your time now? Like, if you picked one thing that gives you the highest ROI and leverage as a leader at this level, what is it?
I think it goes back to what we talked about before: communication and clarity around what do I want to see happen from folks. Like, where are we going? I'm the type of leader who is, very much empowering his people to go and do their best work, right? I try to get myself out of, so we talked about decision making before, and I definitely want to make the right decisions, but at the same time, I also want to ensure that my team can make their own decisions and, have their own failures and, learn as well, right? So for me, the most important thing is clarity in communication and getting across, sort of the big things that I want people to drive. So for instance, let me give an example. So we have an internal innovation offsite we call Radio, our research and development innovation offsite, and it's been around for 20 odd years. Within VMware, it's very well known and loved by the engineering population. It's kind of the pinnacle of the year for many of them.
So an amazing name for an R&D offsite.
Yeah, it's so cool. So we get like a couple of thousand folks together, sharing ideas, presentations, all sorts of stuff. It's like 3 or 4 days of total fun. We had it in person this year for the first time since the pandemic started. It was actually that we have it in May typically. So the last time was May 2019. So it was just awesome to be back in person. Everyone was excited. And it's traditional for the CTO to give the keynote of that event. And so I really look at that as the most important thing that I do all year long is that keynote, because it really sets the tone for the engineering population. And by the way, as CTO, I kind of both have my own team, this 2,300 person organization, but I also represent VMware engineering overall, which, we've got 16, 17,000 people total in R&D. So, and the message was very much for them. It's very much for the whole company, really. And it was about sort of some of the foundational changes that we had to make. So I spent a lot of time on that, and really came down. It was, I think, heard a lot of positive things about it, because what I brought there was saying, hey, like, we're not perfect, we know that. And I kind of talked about some of the ways in which things aren't going well, but some things that we're not doing well that we could be doing better. And I brought in a ton of data and saying, kind of walked everyone through the narrative there. And then focus on some specific changes that I wanted to see, kind of like three big things. But the point of all the story is that what I've been amazed to see is the ways in which that has driven various types of action across the organization, from people I wouldn't even have thought about to engage with. And it just kind of and in fact, just something yesterday, so in one of the presentations, I heard they're like, hey, we got inspired by your radio keynote. We're going off and doing this thing. And I'm like, that's amazing. And that's really, I think, the hallmark for me of a successful leader is when people hear the message and they bring their own creativity and passion to it and think about something that you would never think about. I'm never going to tell this person to go do X. Instead, I'm saying, here's the goal, or here's the hill we want to climb. Let's figure out how to get there. And you just see the creativity and the passion come out. And that's, again, I think the most valuable thing that I can do is sort of targeting and driving that sort of creativity and passion amongst the employee base.